So let's talk about the book of Daniel. You know it, right? Lions' dens, fiery furnaces. But then it gets into some of the most complex, most debated prophecies in the whole Bible. It can feel like two different books. But what if there's a master key? One idea that makes the entire thing just click into place. Okay, let's dive in. I mean, really think about that. What if there's a single repeating pattern that connects those incredible stories in the first half with the wild apocalyptic visions of the second? The source we're digging into today argues that there absolutely is. It reframes the book not as a disconnected puzzle, but as one unified story with a kind of hidden code. So, first things first, we've got to find this key. We're going to explore the argument for how these two parts of the book, which seem so different on the surface, are actually telling the exact same core story, just in different ways. You know, the big challenge with Daniel has always been trying to connect the dots between the historical stories of chapters 1 through 6, and then, bam, the dense symbolic prophecies that take over. The argument we're exploring says they're not separate at all. They're actually two sides of the very same coin, held together by one incredibly powerful theme. And there it is. That's the master key: death and resurrection. Now, I know what you might be thinking, and this probably isn't it. We're not just talking about a literal end-of-the-world physical event. No. This idea is used in a much broader and, honestly, a much more profound way throughout the book. And that brings us to a super important point. We have to define our terms here. What do we actually mean by death and resurrection in this context? Because it's really all about a pattern, a cycle that shapes pretty much everything in the book of Daniel. So think of it like this. Death can be any kind of trial, a downfall, a period of suffering, or judgment. And resurrection is what comes next, the restoration. But here's the crucial twist. It's never just a return to the way things were. It's always a transformation into something better, something more glorious. It's not just about getting back to normal, it's about leveling up. And this isn't some new idea that was just invented to explain Daniel. The source we're looking at points out that this pattern is woven all through the Bible. You see it with Joseph, right? He's thrown into a pit. That's his death. And he rises to become the second most powerful man in Egypt. Jonah goes into the death of the great fish and comes out to fulfill his mission. It's a foundational rhythm you see again and again. In fact, the argument goes even deeper. It says this pattern isn't just common, it's primal. It's something you can trace all the way back to the very first pages of Genesis, which suggests it's kind of built into the fabric of creation itself. Now check this out, because this is a fascinating way to look at it. Think about the creation week. Every single day starts with evening, a kind of darkness, a death, and is followed by morning, a resurrection into a more complete, more glorious state. Even Adam himself goes through it. He's put into a deep sleep, a kind of death, and he wakes up glorified, no longer alone, but with a wife. And this brings up a really key distinction. In a lot of ancient pagan myths, you have gods that die and rise, sure, but it's just part of an endless, unchanging cycle, like seasons. The biblical pattern is completely different. It's linear, it's progressive. Every resurrection actually moves history forward to a better, more glorious state. It's all about transformation, not just repetition. Okay, so we have our key. Now for the fun part. Let's actually put it in the lock and see if it turns. Let's see how this pattern unlocks the stories right inside the book of Daniel. This is where the theory really gets tested. And wow, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere. Chapter 1, the threat of death for refusing the king's food, followed by their exaltation. Chapter 3 is the most obvious, right? Thrown into a fiery furnace, a certain death, and they come out totally unharmed and get promoted. It even happens to King Nebuchadnezzar. His insanity is a death-like state, and he's restored to an even more exalted position. The rhythm is just there, chapter after chapter. And get this, it's not just in the stories happening around him. Daniel personally lives this out. The Bible itself says that right before he gets these huge prophetic visions, he often falls into a death-like deep sleep or is completely overcome, only to be raised up by an angel to get the message. It's like he has to live the pattern before he can prophesy about it. So, what's the big takeaway here? I mean, it's a cool literary pattern, but why does it matter? This is where the whole idea moves from being a neat theory to something with huge theological and, well, practical importance. So, why is there a giant number 8 on your screen? Well, because the argument is that this pattern isn't just a storytelling trick, it's the critical event that comes right before the establishment of all 8 major covenants in the Bible. Think about it. Adam's deep sleep before the covenant of marriage, the flood before the covenant with Noah, and ultimately the death of Christ before the new covenant. It is the way God kicks off a new, more glorious stage of his plan. And this quote from the source material just brings it all home. The pattern isn't just about ancient history or prophecy. It's meant to be a model for our own experience. This cycle of dying to our old selves, to sin, in order to be resurrected into a new and better way of life, that becomes a central part of the whole journey. So, the ultimate conclusion is this. The book of Daniel is teaching that this whole cycle, trial leading to transformation and glorification, is actually the normal experience for God's people living in a messed up world. The book becomes a kind of roadmap for how to face suffering and persecution and all kinds of historical chaos, not with despair, but with this solid expectation of resurrection and renewal. And that leaves us with a final thought, a really powerful question. If we look at our own lives and our own history through this lens, what changes? What if the most difficult moments, those deaths we all experience, aren't just destructive endings? What if they are the necessary first step toward a more glorious resurrection? What if they're actually gateways to transformation?